Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today we're doing a tier list for DPS in Classic Wrath of the Lich King. So I'm evaluating each spec based on pure raw damage, and I'm not really considering the support that they really bring to a raid. This is all about big, chunky, raw numbers. We will evaluate the specs based on every single phase of the game. What this means is Naxxramas, Ulduar, Trial of the Grand Crusader, and then Icecrown Citadel. This is because a number of different specs gain certain power spikes based normally on set bonuses or just getting better stats. When you look at these specs, guys, in the particular tiers, I don't want you to think that they're entirely set in stone. I think personally that they are quite fluid. A certain spec might go up in a cleave fight. It might go up when it gets best in slot gear and set bonuses. It might get better when people actually have bad gear. Because it is important to bear in mind that particular specs are going to shine on different kinds of fights. Classic example, Ret Paladins are always going to top the meters on the cleave fights, but single target, probably not. And this is why it may appear that I'm a little bit more generous than other tier lists that you've seen, because a lot of tier lists I've seen are really harsh on particular specs and don't really fully acknowledge how on certain fights they actually are quite good. And guys, this is all going to be about patch 3.3.5, the actual patch we're getting when Classic Wrath comes out. So all these people who are in the comment section saying, "Oh, back in the day when I played Wrath of the Lich King, the Blood Death Knight and the Demology Warlock trumped the meters," well, guess what? It doesn't anymore, sunshine. And this tier list has nothing to do with private servers, which means unbuffed content with smaller boss HP pools and therefore faster execute phases. Just before I jump in, guys, if you're looking for insanely fast leveling guides and insanely good gold guides, you'll find information to all that in the description down below. But anyway, let's jump in. Right, so first of all, we have Naxxramas. Your big pumpers are your Assassination Rogue, both for Death Knight specs, and the Enhancement Shaman. So Enhancement and Assassination, probably the best single target DPS you're going to get in Naxxramas. And Death Knights are definitely going to be the absolute gods of this tier because they're going to dominate on the cleave fights and the single target fights. Some people like to put the Warlock specs in the S tier, but that's fine for private servers with bigger execute phases, but trust me guys, these bosses are going to go down really fast, so the execute phases are going to be smaller, which means the Warlock specs will pump less. Early on in Wrath, most hunters are going to go survival, just does a little bit more damage. Marksman starts to take over with more armor penetration, but it's still pretty good with decent agility gear, that's why it's in the B tier. And here the Arcane Mage, I would argue the Arcane Mage could maybe squeeze up to an S tier on a melee unfriendly fight and a range friendly fight. I definitely think the Ret Paladin, the Arms Warrior, the Balance Druid and the Shadow Priest will go up a tier on those AoE and cleave fights. And in fact so will the Fury Warrior. I think the Warrior could easily squeeze up to an A tier on those cleave fights. I've seen Fury Warriors do insane damage in Naxxramas. I definitely think all the Warriors in the community are going to surprise us. Only on those cleave fights though. I mean, in the single target situation, yeah, Arms and Fury are not that great. Got to remember guys though, this is the age of Bladestorm, so Bladestorm is very strong, again, on those cleave fights. And I definitely think that a Shadow Priest can go up a tier on those multi-dot fights. And I've put Destruction mid-tier because people keep dissing me when I say Destruction is bad. Apparently, Destruction is a bit slept on and it can actually do more damage than people think, so that's why it's in the mid-tier. And the last oddball in the room is the Beast Mastery Hunter. People are also telling me that Beast Mastery Hunter, when everyone's got really bad gear, will actually do pretty good damage in Naxxramas, so they're probably a higher tier when everyone is just jumping into Naxxramas for the first time. They're also definitely very good for heroic dungeon farming. Now we're talking about Ulduar, so Feral Druid and Combat Rogue definitely get power spikes when they get their tier set bonuses, and also when they get a little bit of cheeky armor penetration. That's why I've just ranked them a little bit higher than these other pumper DPS specs. But don't get me wrong, everything in A tier is definitely going to be topping the meters. Like for instance the Mage here, definitely gets a massive power spike with its set bonus. And then when it comes to, again, these specs, well, let's be specific, Ret, Fury, Balance and Shadow, they're going to go up again on the cleave fights. I would even argue that Fury, even on the single target fights, is going to start to get really good and be like more of an A tier once they're best, and bear in mind best in slot geared. Ulduar geared, like hard mode geared. And to be honest, I think I've been a little bit harsh with Arms here. I think Arms is more of a B to C tier. It's only when after Ulduar, like when everyone's best in slot Ulduar geared, that, yeah, Arms will go down, because all the other specs are getting big power spikes, and then Arms just simply isn't, and neither is Beast Mastery, and neither is Destruction. Just a quick side note, the AoE stun from Destruction spec can be very, very useful for particular Ulduar hard mode, so there is actually a spot for Destruction definitely in Ulduar still. Honestly, Ellie, Balance, Shadow, they are staying as more of a mid-tier DPS for most of the expansion, but they'll go up on the Cleave fights. Now we've got Trial of a Grand Crusader. Death Knight to get a big power spike here, again, set bonuses. The Marksman Hunter finally starts to activate, and so does the Fire Mage. When the Fire Mage gets, they say roughly 45 to 50% crit, that's when it starts to become a little bit nutty. As we can see now, the Warlocks, they're dropping down a little bit to more middle of the pack. And unfortunately at this stage in the game, Elemental will drop down even further. It doesn't get any worse or anything, it's just the fact that all the other specs get much more powerful. I'd also argue that the Ret can sneak into the A tier, because again, they do that great cleave DPS, but they really need a set bonus from Icecrown Citadel before they become a real competitive DPS on single target fights. And then obviously Fury has crept up again. Fury just creeps and creeps and creeps and creeps up, exactly like it did in TBC and, well, let's be honest, most expansions. But unfortunately at this point, Beast Mastery and Arms, they're not even really worth talking about. And now we have the final tier, Icecrown Citadel. Definitely quite a bit of shuffling around it. As you can see, Fury right bang at the top. This is because when Fury does actually generate enough armor penetration, they become, well, arguably the best DPS in the game, particularly when the best in slot geared with a cheeky Shadowmourne. Same goes for the Combat Rogue and the Feral Druid. They just scale incredibly well with armor penetration. At this point, the Fire Mage has so much crit that they're just hot streaking like there's no tomorrow. Death Knights and the Ret Paladin now in the A tier, but I think these DPS specs will outperform the Fire Mage and the Feral on certain cleave fights. Marksman's finally the top dog spec because of its armor penetration, and Affliction will sneak up a little bit, and that's simply because when you're doing heroic mode Icecrown Citadel, the boss HP pulls will be bigger. And then those execute phases are also bigger. I'd also argue in Trial of a Grand Crusader, Affliction does creep up a little bit too. But obviously only when you're doing those heroic modes with the bigger health pools. Now I'm probably being a little bit harsh with Boomkin and Shadow Priest here, to be honest. They're just not on the same level as Death Knights. But on those particular fights again, it's AoE, it's cleave fights for Shadow Priest, and the Boomkin would definitely creep up there. And so arguably will the Demonology Warlock. This probably also looks a little bit harsh for the Enhancement Shaman here. I think they're definitely at the top of the B tier, bottom of the A tier. But unfortunately the Elemental Shaman just doesn't scale as well as the other specs, neither does the Survival Hunter, and that's why they're a little bit lower than all the others. And then again, Beast Mastery and Arms, not even worth talking about. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. Hope I did it short and snappy enough for you. My name is Meliggoblin. To my next video, ciao.